All right. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come and hear about the city's upcoming redistricting process. I hope everybody is warm and safe this evening. Before we get started, I just wanted to let anyone on the call know that live Spanish translation services are being provided, and you can call 720-386-9023 and enter code 104091 star. And I'll have a Spanish translation of that pull up here in just 1 second.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091 estrella.
I just want to note that this webinar is going to be recorded. Throughout these virtual presentations, we will be going over the recordings, and whichever one has the cleanest audio and best visual representation, we will upload to the city's website so that anyone that is unable to attend any of these redistricting meetings are able to watch them and find out this information at their leisure. So, for introductions, my name is Dylan Gibson. I am the City Clerk of Commerce City. My office oversees anything from the city's main phone lines and information desk in the Civic Center. We handle, when COVID's not going on, we handle passport applications. We handle the general business licensing as well as the liquor and marijuana business licensing. We handle records requests. We handle board and commissions. We handle the city council agendas. We handle elections, and then for tonight, we handle the redistricting process whenever that takes place, about every 10 years or so. So typically with me is Jordan Roberts. He's our deputy city clerk. Throughout this process, you will see Jordan and I out in the community, hopefully when the weather's good and COVID isn't so bad in Colorado. We'll be out in the community doing more in-person events. As well as attending, various events and having booths and a presence there. Give me just 1 second, and we will get started on our presentation here. So let me pull that up, and we will go through the process. And then at the end, we ask for questions as part of the registration process. So I'll answer some of those questions that were submitted. And then if anybody thinks of anything at the end, I will also ask if there are questions then. And then we can call it a night for everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to start our presentation here and get us started. Alrighty, so throughout 2022 and 2023, the city is going to be conducting two major projects that both involve generally redistricting in the city. So throughout this process, we are inviting residents to participate in two opportunities for input that will help shape the city for years to come. The first one is going to be a survey to get resident feedback about the makeup and structure of city council seats, with a potential special election to change the composition of the city council in November of 2022, and that will be through a charter amendment that will be on a special election in November of 2022. The second process is going to be redistricting the city's wards following the 2020 census. And I'm going to go over both projects. We'll start with the survey and potential special election first. And then we'll get into the redistricting process second, with both sections of the presentation going over how residents are invited to participate in this process. So as a little bit of background on the city council composition and the survey, voters approved the current city council or the Commerce City charter at the May 5th, 1970 election. The charter has been amended various times since 1970, but since the charter's initial approval by voters in 1970, the city's been divided into 4 wards, and it's consisted of 9 city council members, which includes 1 mayor. So 4 city council members per the Commerce City Charter are elected from each of the city's wards. So we have 1 council member per ward. We have 4 council members elected at large, meaning a vote of the entire city. And then the Commerce City mayor is elected at large, again, meaning a vote of the entire city. All of these 9 members are equal members of council. The mayor's afforded certain special privileges, such as chairing the meeting, being able to call certain special meetings, and being the ceremonial head for, business openings, photo opportunities, stuff like that. So if you aren't familiar, this is a map of Commerce City with the current ward structure. So the last time the city redistricted the wards was back in 2013, about 2 to 3 years following the 2010 census. So we're right about that time in 2022 and into 2023 that we'll be redistricting the city's wards following the 2020 census. And we'll get into that during the redistricting presentation. But if you're not familiar with this map, or your ward, right? We have Ward 2 down in the southwestern portion of the city, Ward 1 that snakes up along Highway 2, Ward 3 that sits up above Ward 1, and then Ward 4 that goes around the Arsenal and out towards the northeastern portions of the city boundaries towards DIA. And again, the current structure is within the yellow lines here. That's the city boundaries. That's where the mayor and the 4 at-large council members are elected from. So anybody in the city votes on the 4 at-large members and the mayor. And then each of the city's ward council members are elected from their wards. So the voters that are in Ward 2 here, they elect their Ward 2 council member. Voters in Ward 1 elect their Ward 1 council member, so on and so forth for Wards 3 and Wards 4. As I'm sure all of us know, Commerce City is one of the fastest growing cities in the Front Range. That newly developed portion in the northeast half of the city has seen the largest population increase over the last decade, and it's changed the makeup of the city overall. The city council has had varying interests over the last several years among different iterations of the city council of examining the city council composition, meaning that they want to look to see if the way that the city council has been structured back whenever that charter was passed back in the 1970s, is the way that the city council is structured in the charter that was passed in 1970s. Is that the way that the city council needs to look, in 2022 and beyond? In order for the current city council to get resident feedback on what the residents would like to see their city council look like, the city council is conducting a survey in early 2022 before potentially placing a charter amendment on the November 2022 ballot. So by the end of March, residents will get either a physical mailed survey that will be available in both English and in Spanish, or they will get what's called a push to web mail card with a link for residents to go to an online survey. So the survey company that we're working with, they are doing a sample size survey of a couple thousand households. And then they're also going to allow the entire city to also have input on this survey and these options. And whenever we get the survey results back and we present to city council, the vendor is going to be able to break out, okay, here's a sample portion of the city and what, the general random sampling survey results came out. And then if there's any difference, right, here's what the entire community in Commerce City, what those results broke out to. So again, I'll go into more detail on this in just a couple slides, but residents can expect to receive this survey by the end of March of this year. And the information and the feedback that you all provide is going to be very important for City Council to make an informed decision on any charter amendment to put forward at a special election in November of 2022. So if you see either the mailed survey in either English and in Spanish, or if you get the push to web mail card, either way, these are both very, very vital methods for residents to offer their feedback for City Council to consider. Part of the survey is going to be asking residents their preferred composition alternative to the way that the city council is structured. And that's going to be the meatiest part of the survey that you're going to find. It's going to ask you some other questions on the role of the mayor, how many council members there should be, how should council members be elected. But the big portion of the survey is going to ask for feedback on 6 different alternatives to a council composition structure. And so what we've done over the last year or so is evaluate various council compositions in other communities, both in the Denver area, throughout Colorado, and throughout the nation, and come up with 6 alternatives for residents to consider whenever they're filling out this ballot of what they would like to see their city council look like in 2023 and beyond, right? We want to make sure, and city council thinks it's important, that the way that current council is structured mirrors what the community and reflects what the community would like to see of their city council. So this survey is going to provide residents the way to do that. So of the 6 options, I'm going to provide some information on those to help residents better prepare for filling this survey out whenever it comes to their mailbox. The last thing we want to do is for any resident to get this mailed survey and have no idea what it's for, why it's important, or what these options mean. So we're going to go over these options, hopefully explain them a little bit better. And again, if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end if you need clarification on any of these. It's a lot of information. I need to take a drink of water, excuse me. So the first option that's going to be on the survey is going to be no change, right? So the way that that Commerce City has structured their city council whenever the charter was first passed in 1970 is the way that residents would like to see their current council composed in 2023 and beyond, right? So as a refresher, we have our 4 ward council members. We have our 4 at-large council members, meaning they're elected from a vote of the entire city. And we have our mayor elected at-large, meaning, again, a vote of the entire city. Just as a note, redistricting requirements will modify the current ward boundaries in 2023. So the wards may look differently, but the actual composition of the city council of those 9 members would remain the same. So, residents feel like, okay, we had it right in 1970. This is how we want our council to look. In 2023 and beyond, we want to keep this current structure. The second option is keeping the current council composition of 9 members with 4 members elected at large, 4 members elected by their ward, and 1 mayor elected at large. But this would require at-large council members to reside within a certain geographic area of the city, similar but not exact to the existing wards. So, right, 1 at-large council member would generally be maybe somewhere in the southwest, another in the northwest, another in the north central area, and then another in the northeast area of the city. And these geographic areas aren't set in stone. This would be something that city council would have to work out of where they want their at-large council members to reside. But this would ensure that no 2 at-large council members could reside within that same geographic area as another at-large council members. So again, a map of the city here, we have our wards. We have the yellow boundary, which is the city's boundary. And what this option would do is mean that no at-large member could reside in the same general geographic area as another, right? So you couldn't have 2 or 3 council members elected from the core city or up in the northeast portion of the city or along Highway 2, right? They would have to be roughly evenly distributed throughout the city. The third option would be that all 8 council members would be elected from each of the city's 4 wards. So this would eliminate our at-large council members, again, the council members that are voted from the entire city. And instead, it would delegate those 4 positions evenly among the existing wards. So each ward would then have 2 council members elected on staggered terms. So for example, Ward 1 would have a council member elected in 2023, and that council member would serve until 2027. And then their second council member would be up for election in 2025 and serve until 2029. So again, another map of the city. So the only person elected from the city at large with this option would be the mayor. So the entire city gets to vote on the mayor, but each ward would have 2 council members. So Ward 2 would have 2 council members, Ward 1, 3, and 4. And they would be, again, on staggered terms. So no ward would change over both council members at the same election. The fourth option would be an all ward option, but with 8 wards. So city council would redistrict, and we'll get into that redistricting process later, but the city would redistrict the current 4 wards into 8 smaller wards, and 1 council member would be elected from each of the 8 wards. So we had our GIS division and our mapping division draft up a sample map of what an 8 ward Commerce City would look like. I want to be very clear that this is just a visual representation. This isn't anything that we're proposing council to adopt as a redistricting process. From a staff perspective, this isn't something that city council is, putting as our redistricting map. The charter provides that we have 4 wards, so we have 4 wards, but if residents wanted to see an 8 ward city, this is potentially kind of what it would look like. So again, we have our yellow boundary, which is the city's boundary. So the mayor would be elected at large from everybody in the city. But Commerce City, instead of having those 4 kind of larger wards, right, it would actually be broken up into 8 smaller wards. So as a visual representation, we have wards 1, 2, 3, and 4 kind of up in the core city and along Highway 2. And then we would have 5, 6, 7, and 8 kind of generally circling around the arsenal and then kind of up in the northeast portion of the city. So a way for people to kind of think about this, right, generally, it's a bad example, but it works a little bit, is that our at-large members are kind of like the House of Representatives, right? Everybody in the state, or at-large members are kind of like the Senate, right? Everybody in the state gets to vote on their 2 senators. And then our House of Representatives, we have drawn into districts, and those are kind of our district members, right? So you have a little bit more control within your ward and your neighborhood of who your council member is that you send to city council to sit on a seat and represent your ward, whereas at-large members are kind of a vote of the entire city. They're supposed to represent the entire city. So a way to think about it, right, is you want more ward control with either the 4 ward or the 8 ward system, or do you want more city at-large control, where everybody at the city, votes on these at-large members and the mayor. So kind of in the complete opposite direction of this 4 ward or this 8 ward system is an all at-large system. So all council members would be elected at large. This would eliminate the city's wards and the ward council members, and everybody in the city gets to vote on all 9 members of council, right? So we have 8 council members elected at large, meaning a vote of the entire city. We'd have our mayor elected at large. Again, this is the person that chairs the city council meetings. They are afforded certain privileges, like being able to call certain special meetings and being the ceremonial figure head of the city council and of the city. And it's another visual representation, right? We no longer have any ward boundaries. It's just one city boundary, meaning all of Commerce City gets to vote on all 9 members of council. There's no geographic residence. There's no ward election. It is everybody in the city gets to vote for everybody on city council. The last option, the 6th option that you'll see on the survey, is that it would be an all at-large council member system. So everybody in the city gets to vote on everybody on council. But the 8 council members would be elected to represent an area of geographic interest within the city. These would be similar, but not exactly the same as a ward. This would eliminate the city's wards and ward council members. So again, it's kind of like the option where we have our current city council structure, but the at-large members would be proposed to not be able to reside within a certain same geographic area of the city. This is similar to that option in that all members of council would be elected at large, and they would all have a resident requirement to be within various different areas of geographic areas within the city. So this is kind of a little bit more complex hybrid option, but it is one of the options that we've seen out in some communities in the United States, and we wanted residents to have a chance to weigh in on these various 6 options of what they would prefer. So again, as I said, the survey will arrive in residents' mailboxes, either in the mailed paper copy of the survey and available both in English and in Spanish, or in the push to web mail card. If you're part of the broader community survey, you will get a little push to web postcard. And then a reminder survey, if you're in the surveyed sample, or if you're in the community sample, a postcard will be mailed about halfway through the survey timeframe. The vendor in the city clerk's office will then analyze the results and present to city council mid-2022. And based on the survey results, city council is going to discuss and debate and determine if they would like to call a special election and set the ballot title sometime between July and August. And setting the ballot title is essentially meaning that they are going to determine which question or questions they would like to put before voters at a special election in November of 2022 that would amend the Commerce City Charter to change the council composition to potentially one of those 6 options, to amend the number of council members, to amend the role of the mayor, right? There's several different questions that will be on the survey, and that council will go over those results and determine and debate amongst themselves which option or options they would like to see on that special election ballot to amend the charter. That special election, again, would be in November of 2022 of this year. And then it would be effective for the city's regular municipal election, which occurs in November of odd-numbered years. So our next regular municipal election is November of 2023. So again, city council is looking at gathering resident input to determine how or what questions to put before voters at a special election, to change the charter, to make, if needed, the city council structure mirror what the community wants if it's different than what we have now on city council. And then that would be effective for November of 2023 and beyond, until such time that city council or residents want to amend the charter again to change that. So that's our survey process. Our next process that we're doing that kind of ties into the survey, as I mentioned in a couple of those slides, is our redistricting process. So every 10 years, Congress conducts the US Census, right? We just finished with the 2020 census, and this is used to determine representation in Congress. States use that data collected and they add or remove congressional districts, right? Colorado had a population increase, so we're adding our 8th congressional district. And now that the Colorado Supreme Court has approved those maps, now the state is redrawing their House and their state Senate maps. Counties will be redrawing their precinct and county commissioner maps. And then cities will be redrawing their municipal wards and their special district maps. So it's important to note that district boundaries, or ward boundaries in the case of the city, have to be redrawn to satisfy certain constitutional doctrines, such as equal populations among the district and ensuring racial equality to avoid diluting the voting power between districts or among minority groups. So there's a reason why municipalities do this kind of towards the tail end of the census process. Is because first we've got to determine at large, right, state congressional maps, and then from there we filter down into state House and state Senate, and then counties redraw their precinct, and then cities redraw their ward maps. Right, so it funnels down into the various levels of government. At which stage do they redraw their maps? So municipalities are at the tail end. That's why we're doing this 2 or 3 years after the census has been conducted. So we're starting our redistricting process in 2022, and per the Commerce City Charter, new ward boundaries must be approved by the City Council no later than 180 days before the next regular municipal election. As I just talked about a couple minutes ago, right, our next regular municipal election is in November of 2023, which means that the City Council's last day to approve new ward maps as part of this redistricting process is Thursday, May 11th. If we do our jobs right, we're going to have City Council approve these much earlier in 2023, so that we can get the word out to residents ahead of the 2023 election of, hey, your ward's changed, double check to make sure you know which ward you're in, who your new council member is, and be prepared for the election, right? So as I said, governmental entities have to satisfy certain constitutional requirements and statutory or constitutional considerations. And those are, as I alluded to earlier, equal populations, right? So you can't have one district with 1,000 members and another district with 2,000 members, right? They have to be as close to the same population as possible. For municipalities, we're afforded about a 10% deviation between the largest ward and the smallest ward in our city. Our goal is to get as close to zero deviation as possible, but we are afforded up to about 10%. The second requirement is that we can't redraw wards to dilute the voting power of any minority group within the city. The third consideration for us as we're redistricting these maps is to make sure that they are compact, right? We can't make a ward unnecessarily sprawl throughout the entire city. We have to redraw ward boundaries so that they are compact and they are what's called contiguous, which means that one part of Ward 1 cannot be separated from another part of Ward 1. They have to be touching. The boundary has to be whole. The fifth consideration is the preservation of boundaries. So as I talked about earlier, right, the state has the state's congressional districts, then the state has the state house and the state senate, and then we have our county precinct and our county commissioner boundaries. All of those maps down from the municipal level up to the state congressional level have to preserve each boundary. So we can't redraw a ward, for example, that splits between two congressional districts or two state house and state senate districts. We have to make sure that our ward boundaries fit within the preservation or preserve the boundaries of the districts and the political boundaries of those governmental entities above us. So we can't split county boundaries, can't split state house or state senate boundaries, and we can't split state congressional boundaries. And lastly, and most importantly, is that we have to do our best to preserve what's called communities of interest. And this is the way that residents are going to have the biggest opportunity to have a voice in this process. And that's what I'm going to spend the most time on here and go over how residents can offer their input on these communities of interest. So you might not be familiar with what a community of interest is. Communities of interest are geographic areas composed of people who share similar policy concerns and should be kept whole within a single district or ward. And these policy interests could be anything from racial interests, social interests, economic interests, demographic, environmental, transportation, agricultural, industrial, or other similar features. A community of interest should be able to tell its own unique story that is distinguishable from another surrounding community. And most importantly, communities of interest should be defined by their local community members who reside there, right? I'm the city clerk. We have other staff, and we all love working for the city. We love helping our residents in the city. But it does no good for me as Dylan Gibson City Clerk to try and define those communities of interest. I want the local community members to define those communities of interest that you live in and you work in and you play in and you have friends and family in and your neighbors in. I want you all to tell me what those communities of interest are that you live in every day, so that whenever we are redrawing our ward maps using the 2020 census and these maps that you're going to submit to us, we can make sure that we do our best to keep you all whole as a community within the same ward, so that everybody in what you define as your community of interest get to elect your council member or council members. So the city is using a tool called Representable to gather community of interest maps from residents. Representable is going to explain the redistricting process to you whenever you first log into the page. It's going to ask for some basic information such as your name and address. The reason why we ask for this is so that we can plot out where we're receiving our community of interest maps throughout the community. And if there's a pocket or an area in the city where we don't have very many or any at all community of interest maps, we want to make sure we get out into that community, let them know that we're conducting this process, let them know that their input is extremely valuable to us and that we want their input as part of this process so they can define their community, make sure that nobody in the city is left out of this. We're going to ask you to define what makes your community unique, and we're going to ask you to draw a map using the online mapping tool and submit to that to us for consideration. So I'm going to show you how to use this Representable tool. If you ever have any questions on this, please feel free to reach out to me. I will send everybody that's in this Zoom webinar my contact information, as well as very important links for you that we'll go over at the end of this meeting. So whenever you first go to the city's online mapping tool, it's going to have a splash page here. And if you scroll down on the splash page, it's going to walk you through the redistricting process. It's going to relay a lot of the same information that we went over tonight. But if you want to reread or get a refresher, feel free to read that splash page and that information down there. Once you're done reading that, you can click on the Get Started button. And again, this is where it's going to ask you for some basic information. We're just asking for your name and address, right? So I'm Dylan Gibson. For this example, I reside at the Commerce City Civic Center, which is located at 7887 East 60th Avenue. You're going to click on Next. And this is a portion where you get to tell us what makes your community unique. Again, we're asking for your geographic area that shares cultural, historic, economic interests, or other interests that helps us draw our ward boundaries more fair. Here you can see about 3 categories on the screen. If you scroll down, there's going to be about 2 or 3 more. We don't ask that you fill out every single one. If you would like to, that's more information for us and that helps us, and that's great. But we require that you fill out just one of these at minimum. So for example, in the community activities and services area, as the example, since I live at the Civic Center for this, I wrote that we're near South Adams County Fire Protection District and the Dick's Sporting Goods Park. Our community, we host sporting events and concerts, and it's a hub for people seeking government services like passport applications or building permits. Right, whenever you redraw your community of interest using this tool, you can write something about your community activities and services. If you have a lot of churches in your areas or local businesses or parks that host, weekend events or community services, you can add information for cultural or historic interests. There's economic and environmental. There's a section for community needs and wants, right? Like my community needs a park, my community needs a sit-down restaurant. This is your area to tell us what makes your community unique and why we should keep it whole within a ward whenever we redraw our boundaries here. So once you've filled out at least one of these, you can go on to the next page. It's going to ask you to name your community. Again, for the example, I called mine the Commerce City Civic Center. And it's going to ask you just to identify a couple main topics. You can add up to 5. So it's got a general list here that are pretty popular topics for any given community of interest. So I just quickly selected environmental and transportation. If you click this plus button right here, it's actually going to pop up with a big list of hundreds of different topics. If you don't see yours on this list over here, this tag list is going to have hundreds of them. So I just, selected environmental and a Latinx. And then from there, I click next. And then this is where you can put in your zip code, your address, or a landmark. And then this map is going to zoom in on your address. So you can quickly identify where you live at or where you work at or where your landmark is that you want to identify. So you can start drawing your community of interest. So once I entered the Civic Center, it zoomed in right here where the Civic Center and Dick's Sporting Goods Park is. And then if you see this dark blue boundary here, this is the city's boundary. So this is to help you all as you're clicking on these various divisions that you see here with these dark lines, identify what's within the city and what's outside of the city. If you end up clicking on a block here that goes outside of the boundaries, that's okay. You don't have to have it exactly within the city boundaries. We're able to filter out around the city boundaries for our purposes. We just ask that you select, if you see these thinner black lines, at least one of these areas, one of these boxes that's a census block to draw your boundaries. So whenever you click on these little divisions using the tool here, it's going to turn blue. And that means that you've selected that as part of your community of interest. So for our example, right, I clicked around the Civic Center here and Dick's Sporting Goods Park around the the southern portion here on the Arsenal where the Civic Center is, this portion up here near Adams High School, out towards the Eagle Point Recreation Center, and then, kind of the areas along 60th and Quebec, and then down here. So if you don't want to sit here and try and select these individual small blocks, you can actually adjust your selection size up here in the top right corner. And that's going to select multiple of these at a time for you. If you accidentally selected a box and you need to undo that, you can erase individual portions of these blocks that you don't want as part of your community of interest map. If you selected something and you want to undo the entire selection, you just click undo. If you just completely messed up, you can click the clear map and start over. But these tools up here help you select or redraw your district map. Or your community of interest map, excuse me. So once you're done, just as a note, right, you can't select an area that's disconnected. So if I selected something over here, I can't also select something over here and not have them connected. So I have to make sure that my community of interest map is entirely connected here as I click through it. But once I've got my community of interest map selected, I'm happy with it. This is what I want the city to consider keeping whole within a single ward whenever they're redrawing their ward boundaries. I'm going to click save. It's going to bring you to just a real generic terms of use map to accept their terms, do the little CAPTCHA bot here, and then you're going to submit your map. From here, you're going to get a visual copy of your map that you can see right here. You can download your submission in PDF, in an Excel format, or in a geographic format. You can select some data layers to see how your community of interest map fits within existing congressional districts, within the Commerce City wards if you wanted to, within the Commerce City neighborhoods, county precinct boundaries if you wanted to. You can even play with some previous election data that we have and some demographic data that we have. You can also see the public input portal to see what other community of interest maps have been submitted within Commerce City and view those as well. But once you're done with this, it would be really great if you could share your map on social media, if you could tell your friends, your family, your coworkers, and your neighbors about this, right? Our goal is to get as many community of interest maps as possible as part of this process. The more maps we have, the better that we can redraw our Commerce City wards to make it more fair, more equitable, and better for Commerce City residents whenever they're electing their council members in the upcoming elections that'll last us through 2030, whenever the next census will be conducted and beyond. So in 2032, 2033, we'll be starting this process all over again. We want to make sure that our boundaries that we're setting today are good boundaries to last us through the next census. So once we get a good portion of community of interest maps submitted, sorry, my office light went off there. We are going to work with our GIS division to go over census data, to go over the community of interest maps, to go over some other information, and have a draft map submitted to the City Council and available for public comment in late 2022. Our goal is right around November, December of 2022. We're going to take council feedback and the public comment from those draft maps, and we're going to work to present final maps in early 2023, right around February, March timeframe. Again, per the Commerce City Charter, council has to adopt those maps no later than May 2023 ahead of the November 2023 regular municipal election. Lastly, we've got some links here for you all. You all don't need to worry about writing these down. I'm going to send you these links in a follow-up email after this meeting. But I'm going to send you the link to the Representable portal to submit your community of interest map. If you would like more information, written information, more links, or at a certain point in the future, we'll have a recording of one of these information sessions to rewatch again if you would like to. You can find our redistricting information, the survey, and the special election information at c3gov.com/redistricting. And if you aren't already, Colorado makes it incredibly easy to register to vote. You can register the same day as an election online at govotecolorado.gov. If you're unable to register online, you can go to any of the voting services center whenever an election is being conducted and register same day to vote at one of those voting services center. Or you can go up to the Adams County Clerk and Recorder's office in their election division, and you can register to vote there as well. So with that, I just want to thank you all again for taking time out of your evening to attend, learn more about this process, and I invite you all to fill out the survey whenever you get that in March, whether that's, again, the sample size physical survey, or if you just get the push to webmail card. Those responses are going to be extremely valuable for City Council in determining how to conduct their special election later this year. And then also to submit your community of interest map and get your neighbors, friends, family, and coworkers to submit their maps as well and really spread the word for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions that you may have. We have some that were submitted as part of the registration process, so I'll go over those.